Nearly 600 employees from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, were included in the most recent government layoffs. That was roughly 5% of their workforce. Hundreds of people gathered today at NOAA headquarters in D.C. and Colorado to protest the downsizing. Now, you might be wondering, what does this mean for you? Well, joining us now is former NOAA research scientist Zach Labe. Thanks for being with us, Zach.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, I know that weather is something that clearly impacts everybody, but explain how much of the weather information that people are getting on their phones, on their apps, and their local news depends on NOAA and the National Weather Service.
Really, NOAA is providing the foundation for just that, all of the data that supports the weather apps on your phone, the newspaper forecast, your TV forecast. All of that is being done by researchers and forecasters from NOAA and the National Weather Service.
So the American Meteorological Society is out with a statement on these layoffs, and they're saying, quote, the consequences to the American people will be large and wide-ranging, including increased vulnerability to hazardous weather. So, Zach, what's the worst-case scenario for the impact of these layoffs?
Well, I can guarantee that my colleagues still at NOAA will be trying their hardest to make sure we still get out that forecast to warn you of an approaching hurricane or a day that has a risk of a tornado. But the problem is that it's been known for years that NOAA has been understaffed. And the concern is that by having fewer and fewer staff, researchers and forecasters working to understand this extreme weather, that this will lead to burnout and that this will lead to possibilities that there's inaccuracies in the forecast. So it's directly linked to a public safety concern.
And because there's an amplifier effect, I would imagine that the raw data needs to be that much more accurate. Now, I know that you got a layoff notice yourself late last week. How long have you been at NOAA, and what was your job? What are your plans?
I started back in 2022 at a NOAA Cooperative Institute. So I was hired essentially as a contractor between Princeton University and NOAA's Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory, and then only finally recently became a federal civil servant as a research position at NOAA. So in fact, many of my colleagues that were impacted by these layoffs have been at NOAA in some cases for decades. And they were just perhaps, promoted to a new position and entered this probationary status. So we're seeing not only is it just a new hires, those who started recently, but people are being affected who have been at NOAA for decades. And this is a great loss of institutional knowledge.
That is a lot of institutional memory walking out the door. Now, NOAA is also responsible for tracking and predicting tropical weather systems and hurricanes. How might this impact the upcoming hurricane season with all these staff cuts?
Absolutely. It's going to affect it in several ways. So some of the people impacted by these layoffs were those who are directly working to advance our models, to make sure that the U.S. models that predict the hurricanes are the best of the best. And so some of these people were those who were, one of very few who can actually run and develop the models that predict these hurricanes. And we're also seeing impacts to the forecasters, those providing you 24-hour coverage, of an approaching hurricane making landfall were directly impacted this. So we're going to see it both in terms of the forecast and the operational side, which will certainly lead to pushbacks in the short term, this hurricane season, and going forward into the future with the loss of people who are developing to improve our forecasts.
Now, I'm sure you're still in touch with so many of your friends and people at NOAA. What are your colleagues most concerned about tonight?
I think many of my colleagues have just been expressing support to raise, our stories of what we do at NOAA. NOAA is by far one of the most mission-driven agencies. It's really not just to only understand our changing weather and environment, but it's also to educate others and communicate this information to the public. Everyone I work with is working not just at the science, but to understand how this affects people, how it affects the American public with a real focus on public safety and communication.
Zach Labe, public servant, thank you. And we're thinking of you and your colleagues tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.